25, rising pop star David would board his tour bus to begin his Withered World Tour. But just moments before he departed on that bus, somebody allegedly moved his Tesla.
July 29th, important because that was the last day that David was in Los Angeles, right? But before he went off on his tour. So he was there in Los Angeles on that day that drive happened. How certain are you that this video of the car driving away from David's mansion is the last time it drove and ended up at the spot where it was abandoned, likely with that body inside?
I'm certain.
It was left on a secluded Hollywood Hills street, and the vehicle would be left untouched for weeks, sitting out there in the summer heat. Eventually, neighbors would notice the smell, but it took a full month before anyone formally reported the vehicle. By the 5th of September, David's Tesla was impounded following multiple parking tickets and complaints, and then 3 days after it was towed, workers at the tow yard would notice a foul smell coming from the vehicle and contact the police. When they opened the front trunk, police would make a shocking discovery, finding the remains of Celeste in such a state of severe decay that initially they couldn't even determine her gender.
Once again, at this time, the identity of the person found in it is not known. Also, not known if the body is that of a male or a female.
And further complicating matters, early reports would suggest that the body was indeed. Within just 24 hours of the body being discovered in the Tesla, the registration would be linked back to the musician David Burke.
We begin with that breaking news. Details after a body was found inside a car at a Hollywood tow lot today. There's no immediate information about the identity of the person found inside, but Eyewitness News has learned the 2023 Tesla is registered in Hempstead, Texas to multi-platinum artist and musician David Anthony Burke, known professionally as David.
And while LA investigators worked the scene, David was mid-tour across the country. Officially, a spokesperson for David would confirm that he had been informed about the discovery and that he was cooperating fully with the police. What went overlooked at the time, however, was the 97 jersey that David wore on stage that night in Minneapolis, the very same numbers as Celeste's birth date, September the 7th. Ultimately, from here, it took the police more than a week to officially identify the body. However, even before they had their answer, chilling details were already spreading across sites like Reddit. In one post, one user claimed a 7th grade runaway from Lake Elsinore had apparently been living with David but hadn't been heard from in months. Meanwhile, another post labeled David a predator, claiming that he was apparently dating an 8th grader named C and had been paying off her friends to keep it a secret. Ultimately, the truth came out on September the 16th when police identified the body as 14-year-old Celeste Hernandez from Lake Elsinore.
We're in Lake Elsinore. That teenager, her name Celeste Hernandez, she was 13 years old when she was last seen leaving this home back in April of 2024. TMZ broke the girl's identification after speaking to her mother.
It was a very heart-wrenching conversation. She was very upset and said that all she knew is that, her daughter had been missing all of this time. She told us that she was aware that there was a boyfriend named David.
And that her daughter had a tattoo with the letters "sh" on her right index finger.
That the color of the ink of that tattoo was red, which was something that police had not released to the public.
Right after that news broke, David would pull the plug on his remaining tour dates.
The LAPD is not calling the death criminal, saying in a statement that at this time, the agency does not have a crime classification from the coroner as to the mode or manner of death. Thus, we do not have any suspect information at this time. And right now, police have not said if they believe the singer David knew or ever had contact with the victim. We are just learning that his show scheduled for tonight in Seattle has now been canceled.
With all of this going on, as police were executing search warrants at his Hollywood Hills home, all while people online would follow along and piece together a disturbing timeline of abuse. According to alleged former Fortnite teammates, David actually met Celeste through playing Fortnite online in 2021 when she was apparently only 10, and he would later add her to his private Discord. More disturbingly, that same person would recall Celeste dropping hints about which the friend group apparently just brushed off as edgy humor. But within that Discord group, thousands of messages from 2021 would suggest that David's illegal relationship was basically an open secret in certain groups. But as David's fame grew, so did the red flags. And after signing with Interscope Records, fresh off the heels of his questionably titled hit song Romantic Homicide, a very strange pattern of coincidences begun to emerge.
In the back of my I can't believe I said it, but it's true. I hate you.
It's really more of a figurative I killed you, especially in the back of my mind. I try to stress that in the back of my mind. That's why I say it so loud. In the back of my mind, you died. In the back of my mind, I killed you. So it's all in the mind, because that's the most secure place you can be, is in your mind.
Crucially, the music video for David's romantic homicide would drop on September the 7th, the very same day as Celeste's birthday. Even more unsettling was the video itself, which depicted David murdering a girl who looked eerily similar to Celeste. And over the next several years, David repeatedly hired actresses who were doppelgangers for the young girl. At the same time, he would frequently time his song launches to coincide with her birthdays. Eventually, his career would take him from Texas to Los Angeles in early 2023, and then suddenly David was living within a short driving distance of Celeste's Lake Elsinore. Soon after this, her family's missing persons report began to align perfectly with the dates that she began appearing in photos with the singer. However, what made matters worse was that the network surrounding David had allegedly supported their relationship. From here, online sleuths would dig deeper into the timeline, uncovering evidence that suggested that David's inner circle may well have known about Celeste all along. Dating back to February 2024, messages would show David's friend Asia Collins discussing the missing persons poster with Celeste's cousin, specifically being told that Celeste was 13 years old at the time. During this exchange, Asia identified the girl on the flyer as David's girlfriend. By June 2024, photos from David's sold-out show at the Fonda Theatre appeared to show the victim Celeste in the VIP section near Josh Marshall, the CEO of Mogul Vision, David's management company. In those same images, Celeste also appears to be seated between David's mother and brother, showing that even the family were aware of David's connection with her. And beyond the VIP section, another video would capture Celeste walking backstage alongside David's own brother. But despite her constant presence, Celeste wouldn't be found in any of the official event photography, which would lead me to believe, in my opinion, was that she was very much someone that was kept around, but also kept a secret and out of the way of the cameras. And while those earlier sightings showed just how deeply David had affected Celeste's world, what would come next would be a series of hints that appeared to reveal exactly why and how he planned to end Celeste's life. Pretty much as soon as Celeste's body was found, her murder case was buried in a near-total blackout of information. Authorities would say very little, but while the police were quiet, online communities, reporters, and private investigators like Steve Fisher would begin piecing the story together themselves. Once David was eventually arrested, the criminal complaint, autopsy findings, and private photos would finally start filling in the gaps as to exactly what had gone down between this couple. By the summer of 2024, photos would appear to show David and Celeste together in public, with Celeste wearing what looked like an engagement ring with a David tattoo on her finger. Around that same time, David would also appear with a tattoo on his finger that read "Shush," apparently matching one found on Celeste's body, and clearly a reference to whatever they had going on being a dark secret. Soon after this, videos and photos would circulate suggesting that Celeste had actually been staying in a house near David's own Beverly Hills mansion.
Why are you doing this, yo?
Another secret property where the two would one night make the inexplicable decision to go on a live stream together.
I media trained you. That's controversial.
It's controversial of kids.
Really good.
Okay,
It's been a good one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Mwah, 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 mwah. Oh my. Delete everything. Delete everything. Everything goes.
Then by early September of 2024, despite reportedly being a missing person, Celeste would seemingly go home, where she was captured on a neighbor's Nest camera outside of her family home the day after her birthday. But by early December, the story would take another dark turn. Messages later released by someone close to Celeste would claim that David had deleted all photos of the two of them from social media, while Celeste allegedly said that the relationship was over. But just weeks later, David would be photographed back in Lake Elsinore, less than a mile from Celeste's family home, apparently handing money to a teenager in a moment that some saw as an extortion attempt, while others described as an effort of David to buy silence from the local teenagers that knew about the relationship. Then, as 2024 came to a close, private investigator Steve Fisher, who was hired by the owner of the property David was living in when this murder happened, would claim that David would actually be seen together with Celeste once again in photos that he found in David's home. These photos would allegedly place them in downtown Los Angeles, and one image would show David holding a knife. Then the next night, more images were taken that appeared to show Celeste around David and his friends on New Year's Eve. After that, the trail led to a camp in the Angeles National Forest, before ending in Baldwin Hills in what became one of the last publicly released photos of Celeste alive. In hindsight, this period of a few days in remote locations would strike many people as something much more suspicious than just a fun outing to the woods. But from there, things would only get worse, as David kept on releasing new music into 2025 after the last known pictures of Celeste alive were taken. The video for the track One More Dance, which was a song that David said was all about having one more dance with somebody before they leave you forever, creating even more suspicion amongst followers. And in the music video, David appears in a blood-covered shirt, dragging a body to a trunk with the help of 2 other people before the figure is eventually buried alongside a camera. By the following month, the gap between David's public rollout and Celeste's eventual murder was starting to look suspiciously coincidental. He would announce that his Withered album would be dropping on April the 25th, 2025, which is just 2 days after the date that prosecutors claimed that Celeste was murdered. And so over this period of time, David would continue as something that is now deeply unsettling when you know that Hello Kitty was one of Celeste's favorite brands. But it wasn't just David. Around the start of March, one of his acquaintances, TikToker Chase Keith, would upload a short film called Buzzkill about a dinner date that turns into a murder and dismemberment. And right from the opening shots, the film would show Chase Keith dragging a body in a black bag to a plastic covered room where it would be dismembered with a knife, including close-ups of the fingers being cut off, a scene that would apparently be eerily similar to Celeste's own dismemberment, with even her fingers being cut off too. But not long after this, there would be more clues that Celeste would be out the picture. The lease on the Doheny Drive property where she was allegedly staying was suddenly terminated, and after that, her whereabouts became impossible to track. Even so, signs of Celeste still appeared around David, including a handbag matching one she'd been seen with before, popping up in the background of one of David's TikToks. Meanwhile, in the lead up to the alleged murder, David was still moving through public life as if nothing had happened. He performed and attended at Coachella alongside several of his friends while his album rollout continued in full view. And then came the day of the alleged murder, April 23rd, 2025. According to the charging document, that was the very day that prosecutors say that David lured Celeste to his Hollywood Hills home and murdered her.
On April 23rd, 2025, as been alleged by the complaint, Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time, went to Mr. Burke's house in the Hollywood Hills. She was never heard from again.
Behind the closed doors of his mansion, the rising star allegedly faced a difficult choice between his skyrocketing career as a pop singer and the 14-year-old girl who could end his life if she decided to speak out against him.
Special circumstance being that this murder was committed for financial gain. As the evidence will show in court, the financial gain was for Mr. Burke to maintain his very lucrative musical career that Celeste was threatening on that particular night.
Allegedly driven by the belief that Celeste would expose his illegal relationship with him.
Is murdering a witness to an investigation. In this particular case, as the evidence will come out in court, the witness to the investigation was Celeste. And the investigation was into the lewd and lascivious sexual acts committed by Mr. Burke with Celeste while she was under 14 years old.
David reportedly used a sharp object after luring her to the property, inflicting multiple wounds to her torso, including a fatal strike to her liver. So if the prosecution's timeline is correct, then the days immediately after April 23rd only make David look more deranged, because while prosecutors alleged that Celeste had arrived at David's rented Hollywood Hills home that evening and was never heard from again, after her life ended, David's public life would appear to move forward as if nothing had happened. The very same day, he was back to promoting his career, announcing the pre-sale for his Withered World Tour. Then, the day after the alleged murder, on April the 24th, his management held a Withered album release party in Los Angeles that David attended in person. The very next day, just as planned months earlier, the Withered album would officially drop, with David popping out in New York just 2 days after the alleged murder, meeting fans, taking group photos, and performing in public. It would be there that he debuted the track Afterlife live for the first time, and during that performance, David visibly broke down crying in the middle of the song and couldn't finish it. On its own, that might have just looked like another emotional moment from an emo singer during a high-pressure album week, but perhaps most disturbingly of all, several tracks on the Withered album featured what many believe to be recordings of Celeste's own voice.
Yeah, why do you think we met?
What I think personally, have you ever heard of the invisible strength theory?
Oh yeah.
Exactly that. So basically, we met because we were supposed to meet.
Okay.
And we're connected because we're supposed to be connected. It's kind of like that, I loved you before I existed and I love you even when I die.
Word.
Yes.
Word. Okay.
But yeah, it's weird, it's strange, it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
So Don't leave me.
Then, less than a week after the alleged killing, David would be seen in interviews discussing how the person who introduced him to the invisible string theory that Celeste talks about on the skit was no longer in his life anymore.
It's kind of explaining from my perspective how it was taught to me, because that's a real conversation that happened. And the irony of it was that person that was saying, I love you, she's not in my life anymore. So it's like, people say that the string can't be cut and the connection cannot be severed, but I feel like it can sometimes. And that's why I wanted to put, Afterlife and all these songs that feel like end eyes on the project to kind of solidify that message of this is the end of something, not the beginning.
From here, David would continue to subtly drop hints about the end of his relationship during other interviews.
It was just the most beautiful thing, and it's such a poetic thing to kind of be able to kind of take somebody's life and put that in a song.
But in the lead up to the alleged dismemberment, which happened over a week after the alleged murder, something else was happening in the very same Discord server that David had once invited Celeste into. According to Discord logs, David repeatedly spammed the word decay in the chat, and by May the 5th, 2025, this was the date prosecutors alleged that Celeste's body was actually cut and dismembered. The dismemberment itself was described as bilateral, with both her arms and legs being systemically separated from her torso before being packed into 2 trash bags that were also found in the Tesla's front trunk. According to the unsealed findings, investigators discovered multiple blue plastic fragments embedded directly into the cut surfaces of Celeste's limbs, with forensic experts suggesting that these fragments likely came from the tool that was used to carry out the dismemberment or the surface she was placed on during the act, with some speculating on Reddit that they would recognize this blue plastic residue as likely the result of a 3D printed saw. But beyond the of the limbs, there were even more heartbreaking details, as it would turn out that Celeste's left ring and pinky fingers were also found to have been removed or mutilated. The left ring finger being the very same one that Celeste apparently had the David tattoo on, and to make matters even more spooky, when her body was discovered, apparently her left eye was missing. Immediately after the alleged dismemberment, another account in David's Discord began posting strange messages, including one that read, "Let us remember who you deceased." Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the entire timeline is the imagery that David chose for his very last final live performances. David's Withered tour featured haunting and unsettling themes of death and remembrance, including real-life caskets being brought out and guest books that led many fans to feel like the whole event resembled a wake or a funeral or some kind of afterlife ritual than a standard concert. Just 2 days before Celeste's body was discovered in David's Tesla on what would have been her 15th birthday, that was the day that David announced the deluxe edition of his Withered album, which he was titling Marsessence. This meant that while Celeste was allegedly decomposing in the front trunk of his Tesla, David was just getting on with his life, leaving behind clues and naming his next album specifically after a word that refers to decay and decomposition.
A phenomenon known as marquescence. Ooh, marquescence. Doesn't that sound lovely? But anyway, what marquescence is, it's the withering and retention of plant organs that are typically dropped.
For 7 months after Celeste's remains were found in his Tesla, David Burke remained a free man.
All of our neighbors were kind of on a group chat, and we were like, this was kind of scary that we've been living around the corner from an accused murderer.
One neighbor actually told me that he's relieved that there was an arrest because he said that there have often been parties at this home. I asked if he's heard parties here recently. He said it's an ongoing problem. Either way, on Monday, we're expected to get our first look at David as he's expected in court in person.
And watching his back was an expert legal team that would insist that the case against him was non-existent. However, on the afternoon of April the 16th, 2026, David would get his last taste of freedom. The police would arrive to another property that he was apparently renting in Hollywood.
It's gonna obscure my view from the gate. It's good?
If you try to run or if you try to resist, you will get hit with my feet door. It's gonna hurt.
I got you.
If you try to run, we have canine on premises and you will get bit.
I got you. All right, so the gate is locked. Do I open the gate? Sir? Open the gate.
And within minutes, the 21-year-old was placed in handcuffs as a specialized task force began a meticulous sweep of the residence.
The 21-year-old taken into custody at a home in the Hollywood Hills. The California Post also releasing this footage showing officers in tactical gear handcuffing David before putting him inside a patrol vehicle.
By April the 20th, the district attorney's office would formally charge David with first-degree murder involving 3 special circumstances: lying in wait, murder for financial gain, and the murder of a witness.
The murder was a way for David Burke to keep Celeste Rivas quiet. They are saying that because she was about at a time when he was beginning a world tour when his fame was going up. He was doing interviews on media really around the world, but here in the U.S., his music was getting tens of millions of streams on Spotify and elsewhere, that he was on his way up and that he wanted to keep her quiet and not reveal a relationship that had been going on between the two of them when she was underage, under 14 years old.
In addition to the murder charge, the indictment included counts of continuous essay of a minor and the unlawful mutilation of a human's remains. During his initial court appearance, David's defense team entered a plea of not guilty on all charges.
The actual evidence will show David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, nor was he the cause of her death. And we would like to be able to have the evidence come into the light of day at the earliest opportunity in order to establish that.
But given the severity of the allegations, the judge would deny him bail, ensuring that he remains safely locked behind bars where he belongs. Currently, the case is moving towards a preliminary hearing where prosecutors are expected to present the smoking gun evidence, including forensic fragments found in the autopsy report and over 40 terabytes of digital evidence.
Today, prosecutors in court presented new disturbing evidence regarding child pornography.
David Anthony Burke appeared in court in an orange jumpsuit, described as stoic, slumped in a chair, looking directly at the judge, and mumbling the single word, "yeah," when asked if he agreed to a specific date. The 21-year-old accused of
who skyrocketed to fame with songs like Romantic Homicide has had a spectacular fall from grace. Months after 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was found dead, her mutilated body reportedly found in David's Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard, prosecutors have now charged David with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. He's entered a not guilty plea. It's important to remember that he is innocent until proven guilty. I say that especially because it can be very hard to remember when we're about to get into these disturbing new alleged details that were revealed by prosecutors. And this is big because there has been so much secrecy to this case. I mean, remember, we just saw the autopsy report last week after it was sealed. In fact, we actually thought that we would have to wait for a preliminary hearing to learn any new details in this case. The preliminary hearing, of course, is where prosecutors try to present sufficient evidence to say, hey, look, we have enough evidence to move this case forward towards trial. And during an arraignment last week, his attorneys told the judge they wanted to get to that preliminary hearing right away.
Counsel, on behalf of your client, do you waive formal reading of the complaint, advisement of rights, including armed forces and veterans' rights, enter a plea of not guilty, denying any and all special allegations, enhancements, and priors?
Yes, Your Honor.
And requesting a preliminary hearing within the period?
Yes, Your Honor. From the media reports, apparently there have been 4 months of secret grand jury proceedings. We believe that Mr. Burke is entitled at the earliest opportunity to an open preliminary hearing and the proceedings not be done in secret. So we are asking for a preliminary hearing to be set at the earliest possible date on the 10th day. Your Honor, we believe the actual evidence will show David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, nor was he the cause of her death. And we would like to be able to have the evidence come into the light of day at the earliest opportunity in order to establish that.
And that was seemingly to put the prosecutor's feet to the fire, right? What do you have? What's your evidence? There's been a lot of questions swirling over whether, you didn't get a grand jury indictment, right? Is there a weakness in this case? Remember, despite apparently multiple secret grand juries considering this case, evaluating evidence, hearing evidence, for whatever reason, they chose not to indict, or maybe they weren't asked to indict. Could have just been an investigative grand jury or investigative grand juries. Which means now it's up to prosecutors to convince the court in a preliminary hearing that there's enough evidence to move this case towards trial. The defense will have an opportunity to challenge that. But when David's attorneys returned to court yesterday to discuss when a preliminary hearing would happen, they said the original date of Friday, this Friday, was in fact too soon. They haven't had nearly enough time to review the huge amount of evidence to challenge it at a hearing. So this preliminary hearing has been pushed back to May 26th. But that's not even the big news. This is what I have in my hands. Because for the first time, prosecutors are laying out some of the alleged evidence they have against David and what they claim they could prove at an eventual trial. And I will warn you right now, the claims in this document are incredibly disturbing. allegations that he stabbed this 14-year-old girl to death to keep her from revealing that he had been sexually abusing her. That's the allegation. That he allegedly used a chainsaw to cut up her body in an inflatable kiddie pool in the garage. More details regarding this alleged secret, illegal sexual relationship. More importantly, for the prosecution's case, what evidence they have to prove that. And that's what I want to get into. So according to investigators, Celeste was last seen or heard from on April 23rd, 2025, when David, according to prosecutors, sent a rideshare car to pick her up from her hometown of Lake Elsinore and bring her back to the home that he was apparently renting in the Hollywood Hills, a trip of more than 80 miles. Prosecutors claim she was exchanging messages with David during this ride, and then she apparently never uses the phone again. Celeste's dismembered body was found months later on September 8th in a Tesla Model X, allegedly registered to David. And according to this filing, the car had been parked on the street just 400 feet from where David was staying, and then it was towed. The manager at the tow yard reported a horrific smell, flies around the front trunk, and that's when authorities discovered Celeste's body. According to this document, it's called the People's Brief regarding preliminary hearing evidence, quote, surveillance video and other evidence confirm defendant, meaning David, was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29th, 2025 before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour. So that's about, what, a month or so before the car was towed and the body was found. It's not clear if anyone else actually moved the car or had any knowledge of what was reportedly inside. I want you to keep that in mind. We're going to talk about it later. There's something in the filing that I thought was really interesting. But it goes on to say, quote, at the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and observed a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag, they discovered a severely decomposed head and torso. A plastic garbage bag beneath the black cadaver bag contained the dismembered arms and legs. However, the victim's ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla. On September 16, 2025, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department positively identified the body from dental records as belonging to the victim. But this is the part that's new, okay? The filing claims that LAPD robbery homicide detectives determined that Celeste and David met in January of 2022 when she was just 11 years old. That he allegedly began a sexual relationship with Celeste when she was 13. David was 18. And the court paperwork revealed that investigators have been looking into David for quite some time. The filing says, detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family, who live in Lake Elsinore, in February and April 2024. RCSD telephonically contacted defendant on February 17, 2024, after they identified a phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. During the call, defendant claimed he had spoken to the victim last on February 13th or 14th, 2024, but stated he was unaware she was a minor or that she had been reported missing. RCSD advised him that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies would be coming to his home. On that day, defendant was living at 804 North Doheny Place in West Hollywood. RCSD requested that LASD conduct a welfare check at defendant's home. LASD deputies went to defendant's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. Defendant again claimed he was unaware she was a minor and he had only met the victim once in person in November of 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time, she returned home 2 days later. By the way, you're seeing how in-depth this investigation was, and maybe kind of gives us an idea of why it took so long for there to be an arrest and for these charges and for the evidence to develop. But remember, prosecutors claim he killed her to keep her quiet about this supposed relationship, to not have her expose him to ruin his career. Just keep that in mind. So the filing continues, quote, despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. Defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. So now I'm thinking travel records, right? I'm thinking how in-depth this investigation was. And by the way, this is the first time we're hearing just how often Celeste was with, or allegedly was with, this much older man. And it really speaks to how many people were potentially aware that he was maybe in this relationship with a younger girl, right? Members of online forums that David and Celeste were reportedly part of have said they didn't know Celeste was so young, thinking she was David's age. But if she was traveling with him to different places and meeting these people in a circle, did none of them suspect that something was maybe amiss here? I mean, again, assuming these allegations are true. You go back to the filing, quote, text exchanges between the victim and defendant contain references to sex, pregnancy, abortion, and use of the Plan B emergency contraceptive. There are also explicit photographs documenting and corroborating their sexual relationship. In November 2024, defendant and the victim broke up, although they continued to communicate, and text messages suggest they also continued to have sexual relations. See, that's the kind of alleged evidence that is incredibly compelling. What separates this from other cases of, let's say, a he said, she said, right? That's the kind of alleged evidence that supports the sex charge, but goes to the special circumstances of killing a witness, right? Remember, to support the special circumstances allegations, which you would get life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder charge or the death penalty, allegedly killing her because she's a witness to this, or allegedly killing her to silence her. It's evidence of this purported sexual relationship that's really problematic, or potentially really problematic for David.
And by the way, I have to tell you, this just came out at the time of this recording. So the death certificate for Celeste, and this is per reporting from TMZ, there's a change. It used to say that she was not pregnant. Now it's saying that section is marked U for unknown. So what is this suggesting? That it was possible she could have been pregnant? Not entirely clear.
Per prosecutors, quote, April 23rd, 2025 is the likely date of the victim's death and when all her cellular activity ceased. The night prior, April 22nd, 2025, defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages reveal the victim's jealousy over defendant's relationships with other women, as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. Defendant's first studio album was due to be released on April 25th, 2025, so 2 days later. He had an emerging multi-million-dollar career already in progress. He also had multiple product endorsements which were highly profitable. I mean, to give you an idea about what was at stake and what the prosecution may use at trial or a preliminary hearing, I mean, we told you in an episode yesterday that after David was arrested on murder and mutilation charges, the video game Fortnite announced it was going to refund players who made David-related purchases in the game, saying in a statement, we hear the concerns. We have a bunch of changes we're rolling out over time. The first one will be available on Tuesday, April 28th, when anyone who purchased one of these items will be able to get an immediate self-service refund. And right now, players who request refunds for David Cosmetics via player support can be refunded. And according to reporting from the Houston Chronicle, David's song, Locked and Loaded, became the game's first official theme song in 2025. Now he's being canceled across the board. You have companies like Universal Music Group working to remove the songs that he apparently did in collaboration with their artists from streaming platforms. And I say all that because, again, think about what was going on in his life. Think about the height of his career at that time. I have to imagine that prosecutors are going to use this to establish the narrative that he couldn't let Celeste expose him, right? Again, these are just allegations. This is the prosecution's narrative, but you see where they're going. So investigators contend that April 23rd was when Celeste was killed, soon after arriving at that house in the Hollywood Hills. Quote, at approximately 8:40 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025, defendant sent an Uber to transport the victim from her Lake Elsinore home to his residence. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at defendant's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. At approximately 10:30 p.m., defendant sent text messages to the victim inquiring where she was. The people contend this was part of defendant's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by this time. If that's true, that is a quick turnaround from when she arrived to when she was killed, right? And that goes to that premeditation aspect, lying in wait.
My marshals came up big today.
Quote, knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career as she had threatened very soon after her arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. Despite knowing she was dead and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show defendant lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, defendant drove to Santa Barbara County. This is something we've always talked about before. Drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after the victim died, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy evidence. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2025, he drove away from his home as he texted and called the victim's phone asking where she was. Again, these were acts calculated and planned to set up his defense within a very short timeline after the victim's vicious murder. Defendant drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, SR 154, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. He returned home early the following morning on April 24, 2025, before going to a radio interview for the release of his album that week. He sent 2 additional texts to the victim's phone that day, which obviously went unanswered because she was already dead. After April 26, 2025, defendant never attempted to contact her again. And if that's true, that would be strange, right? Because if that's the case and he had no idea what happened to her, wouldn't he be desperately trying to get a hold of her? I think that's an argument that would be put forward by prosecutors. And then the filing gets into the incredibly disturbing details of how David allegedly cut Celeste's body into pieces. Quote, tellingly, defendant subsequently purchased tools to carry out his plot to dismember or dispose of the victim's body. On April 24, 2025, defendant ordered a shovel from Home Depot that was delivered to his home from Postmates. On May 1st, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered 2 chainsaws to his home. On May 5th, 2025, defendant ordered and Amazon subsequently delivered a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool to his home. He made these purchases under the fake name Victoria Mendez. On May 8th, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home around 11:30 p.m. He returned to the area again on May 31st, 2025. This is an isolated site off SR 154 where the victim's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Additionally, on July 7th, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the same fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. We've talked about that before with Steve Fisher, the private investigator. Quote, moreover, defendant took horrifying measures to destroy and discard the victim's body. After placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor, defendant used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to cut off her limbs. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in the victim's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analyzed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit. An expert was able to match a physical fit match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool purchased by defendant in May 2025. In order to distance himself from the victim, he amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have not been recovered. Defendant then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bag he purchased. He placed her limbs into a garbage bag, which he deposited into his front trunk, laying the cadaver bag on top. For several weeks or possibly months, defendant left the victim's body to decompose inside his Tesla. Let me stop right there. As you can see, prosecutors are going to claim they have digital evidence, forensic evidence, purchase history to all support this. I have to imagine this will be challenged by the defense with their own experts. And if there's certain items of evidence, body parts that are missing, they'll try to make room for reasonable doubt. But it's really, you're seeing now how they are building this case and what they've been doing. I mean, Steve Fisher talked about, what was it, like 54 search warrants were issued in this case. And this, by the way, is all important because we always wondered, did David have help, right? This is a monumental alleged task, allegedly done by a 20-year-old singer by himself. But I will tell you, the filing does make you question if maybe, you know what? Maybe he did allegedly act alone. The filing states that David, quote, lied to friends, business associates, and others about the strong smell of decay in and around the home and the car. When LAPD served the search warrant at the house after Celeste was identified, they reportedly found all sorts of evidence in the garage to support dismemberment, including biological evidence that tested positive for blood. They say it matched the victim's unique genetic profile, as well as the inflatable pool, which had these multiple, quote, linear cuts And I want to go through the list of evidence that the state provides, which it says will be able to present at trial to prove David's guilt. Again, allegations, but let me go through this. And by the way, photos and videos of some of that evidence was released on X by private investigator Steve Fisher, who's been on this case from the beginning. He was hired by the owner of the Hollywood Hills home that David was apparently renting, who had a lot of questions about just what was going on at this property when Celeste's body was found, and the Tesla was allegedly connected back to the singer. But since then, I've spoken with Steve many times about what he's been able to uncover, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But back to this evidence list. First, quote, the description of photographs depicting the victim naked, as well as while she was engaged with defendant in sexual activity when she was 13, as this evidence constitutes child sexual abuse material. The photographs themselves will not be presented. While all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, the CSAM is proof of their ongoing sexual relationship while the victim was 13 and 14 years old. I also do wonder if you're looking at potential federal charges here. Quote, numerous text messages between defendant and the victim evidencing their sexual relationship, pregnancy, abortion, use of Plan B, emergency contraception. Messages through March 2025 prove defendant continued to manipulate the victim as she messaged, all we do is have sex and just hang out. Man, I want more than that for myself. These messages were obtained from defendant's iCloud data. Defendant's cellular activity and communications derived from defendant's iPhone and Tesla, which demonstrate defendant's activities from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025, including a trip to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after the victim arrived at his Hollywood Hills home. Surveillance video of defendant driving his Tesla on July 29, 2025 for the last time before parking the vehicle and leaving on tour at the end of July. So Steve Fisher shared the surveillance video after the hearing on X, reportedly showing the Tesla one of the last times it was driven. It's believed that Celeste's dismembered remains were inside that front trunk. And the list of potential evidence continues, quote, DNA evidence developed from blood stains collected from defendant's garage, which matched the victim's genetic profile, proof of defendant's Amazon purchases and deliveries to his residence, including 2 chainsaws, a body bag, an inflatable pool, heavy-duty laundry bags, a burn cage after April 24th, 2025. Steve also shared photos of some of these alleged packages. You can see the deliveries are addressed to Victoria Mendez. Not clear why David would allegedly use that particular name. Quote, proof of defendant's purchase and delivery from Postmates of a shovel from Home Depot to his home on April 24th, 2025. Uber records showing defendant's transaction where he ordered an Uber to pick up the victim from her Lake Elsinore home and transport her to his residence the night of April 23rd, 2025. Proof of defendant's lucrative career as a singer-songwriter prior to April 23rd, 2025. Defendant had an album release party on the night of April 24th, 2025 before embarking on an international tour in late July 2025. Text message exchanges between defendant and the victim on April 22nd and April 23rd, 2025, where the victim threatened to expose defendant and destroy his career. The prosecution has issued numerous subpoenas and is prepared to proceed with the preliminary hearing. Now, as I mentioned before, the court again decided to push this back to May 26th, and the delay was frustrating for a lot of people, including Steve Fisher. He's been very vocal on social media about what seemed to be a lack of transparency, a slow investigation on the part of authorities. Remember, David wasn't arrested until 1 year after, when prosecutors believe Celeste was killed. She was last seen or heard from in April 2025. Her body was found in the Tesla in September, and then David was taken into custody, 10 days ago? So yesterday, after the delay, he tweeted, quote, from the David hearing continued until May 26th, the speedy preliminary was a bluff by the defense. The game of hide the ball from the public has started. The judge agreed to put a protective order on the search warrants and affidavits, as well as the grand jury transcripts. So much for an open and transparent system. David's defense even asked for a simple brief to be sealed. After running the worst PR campaign in history the last 7 months, not coming out with a single statement supporting their client, the defense now thinks the public will form a poor opinion of their client if the public sees any of the discovery. His lawyers seem more like publicists than criminal trial litigators. Hashtag Celeste Hernandez. Now, I had a chance to speak with Steve as well as certified death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan last night on my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, and they talked more about